it was kind of interesting because, of course, I've been here and we've been in touch. And he kind of got that. There was a little bit of PTSD just from being in New York the last 6 months. He was like, got to his room, you know, he travels with his wife, Katarina, and it's like they were just like, get in the room and just stay here, you know. And they're a little bit like, I mean, everybody's weirded out by the situation, but noticeably different than most Europeans. Yeah. I mean, we were alternating with another band.
Oh.
It was a duo.
Really?
And so they were there, but that was 2 Brazilians and Chano Dominguez, piano player. And
From Brazil.
yeah, well, yeah, right. Chano was from Barcelona. I mean, he was in New York, but he moved back to Barcelona now. And but again, a completely different attitude than Monty coming from New York.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of.
Where's everybody?
Oh, really? So let's start.
I know, it's really good.
Stop
I'm not
time.
gonna wait all day. Already. Wait 4 more
playing
minutes.
Stop time, we didn't just. Nothing like you.
Yeah.
Is it supposed to be 2:30 or
Yeah, this is how it
2:45?
starts.
No,
We're done for done, dang, dang, dang. We
Then
came
we
in
walk.
there. But then we come back that same morning.
Yeah.
And then we do.
But here it says walk at letter B. I got
One
it.
little thing, Steve.
Okay, so here you got the break. Then here it says walk, but here it says stop time, head on. And then it says walk here. So what am I?
You said so.
What do we do?
Das ist wunderzusammen.
Just walk.
Das stimmt, habe ich vergessen. Aber wenn es so oder so sein.
I think this is referring to us.
Okay, so but the fact that it says walk here and then it says walk here, just continue. I mean, that's what we did, we just played it on.
That's what, see this little. It should be this.
Ach ja, das ist
Yeah,
das.
that's the
It's on
first
the
one.
table.
Ich habe über 20 Euro noch so eine Kamera gekauft, aber das ist so
But we play, we can't do it. It's like-
Yeah, I know.
Ja, wobei ich heute ernst, wo das nach einem Monat des Bluts nicht mehr funktioniert hat, heißt es nicht viel gepokert.
Okay, well,
Der
I
hat
think
für
we
seine
should
Zeit.
start.
Habe ich nicht. Deswegen dachte ich, komm, aber es funktioniert einwandfrei. Und wenn das frei ist,
How sound so far?
dann bin ich sehr zufrieden. Also, das klingt billig aber alles klingt billig bezahlt.
This is the first time?
Ich denke, ich war auf der Hälfte.
No, not with him. I think for us, yes.
Yes, good.
We're ready.
Welcome everybody. Nice that we have it in this hall once, because usually, of course, downstairs, but because choir since today is also cancelled, we were able to do this here, and I really like that a lot because it's also a nice room, a nice piano, eh?
Yes.
The old
A
days.
couple of things before we start. As you have noticed, there are more strict regulations now also for us, and we would like you to follow them. So wear your masks when walking around in school. Don't hang in between classes, or if you don't have anything to do here, then better to go home or do something outside, because we have less pressure in the building, because we don't want to have an outbreak here in school, which would mean probably total closure and going online again. We don't want that. I've sent you a mail about that. Keep your distance, wash your hands, blah 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 blah. You know the drill, so please do so. And without further ado, Dena was here already 10 years ago for the last time. She's been on one of the first in the program when we invented it, and when Joris came with it in 2012, you came in 2004 or 3 or something like that, right?
2001.
2001 right away with Miles and involved and everybody? Oh my God, yeah. Such a long time ago.
That's why she quit.
But she's now a professor in Graz, and we are very lucky to have her here today, together with Paul and Steve. And I wish you a lot of fun with Dena and Rose.
2, 1, 2. Gotta learn all this traveling code. Grab your axe if you have to roll. Then step lively, my friend, 'cause there just ain't no one to slow. Go and forget all the clothes you sold. You can't stay if you only know. Should've paid much more heed to my music room as it shows. Music schools teach you those things, and then most. But this life's more than just that. It's a treadmill of songs, and they lead everywhere, my friend. So remember, there ain't no end. It's just backaches and cramps, no sleep, nothing that could be so. Songs from my newest recording, and the title track was Ode to the Road. We're going to continue with a song written by another great composer, like Alan Broadbent, is Bob Derose, and he wrote a number of jazz songs, along with being a composer for children's television back in the 70s. Remember Schoolhouse Rock? On Saturday mornings, anyhow. Just a bill on Capitol Hill, remember that one? Anyhow. But he wrote these really cool tunes too, these jazz tunes. And this one,
I was into 4 Schoolhouse.
yeah. This one is a fun one because it goes through a lot of different keys. Nothing like you has ever been seen before. Nothing like you existed a day in your life. Never been so visible, never were I so bright. I can make my vision face, you're like a dream come true. Something that you do, nothing like you has ever been seen before. Nothing like you has ever been known before. Kisses I know, but not so divine before. No one has more magnificence, who can describe it so? I'd like to make my residence forever in your arms. I never knew how wonderful life could be. Nothing but you, and everything is to me. Are we ever in love? One thing I'm certain of, nothing like you has ever been seen before. Nothing like you, nothing like you. Nothing like you has ever been before. president forever. I never knew how wonderful life could be. No one but you could ever do. I'll never really love one thing that's true love. Nothing like you has ever been before. Nothing like you. Nothing like you. Nothing like you has ever seen. Nothing like you has ever seen. Nothing like you has ever seen before. Yes, Steve. Paul. Nice. It's nice to play again.
We miss her. I do. I miss her.
Another song by Bob Derose, at least the music, and the lyric is from Fran Landsman. They're both not with us anymore, but great, both of them great careers they had in composing and being a lyricist. Got a small day tomorrow. Small day tomorrow. I don't have to use my head. Got a small day tomorrow. Won't cause too much sorrow. No, not tomorrow. Tonight, this cat's gonna play. 'Cause I got a small day tomorrow. Car I can borrow tomorrow. We can swing till broad daylight. We've got a small day tomorrow. lightning borrow till tomorrow. We can swing way outside. We got a small day. We got a small day. We got a small day. That was perfect timing.
You gotta create some excitement. It's a show.
Drama queen over there.
That's what we're talking about today. Music, nah. Theater.
Yeah, right. Mhm. This morning, during composition class, I brought in a tune that I put some lyrics to. It's by the great Cedar Walton. He calls this tune Clockwise, and I said a lyric to it, not so much with the idea of a clock and everything, but my version is called Listen to Your Heart. Cedar Walton. It's about that time. We're going to do one more tune for you. And it's an original song of mine. It is off my latest CD. And this was inspired, we were talking again in composition this morning, and the question was, one of the questions was, how do you compose? Do you start with a melody? Do you start with the harmony, words, what? And it varies. This particular song, I was inspired by a pianist back in the 80s, the 19. And she was a pianist with steps ahead. I was more into fusion before I was into real straight ahead jazz. And Ileana Elias is her name. And her first or second solo CD with her band, she had a song called At First Sight. And it was really one of the first transcriptions I ever tried to do. And mainly I just listened to it, tried to play along, and tried to write it out. I look at it now and I'm like, oh my God. I was really bad at transcribing when I was young. But the song, it stuck with me, and I still love the CD that it's on. I think it's even called At First Sight. And when it came time to write some new music a few years ago, that song happened to be on the top of a pile in my studio, and I picked it out and I said, I like this tune, so I'd like to write a song like that. I liked it because it had this cool groove at the beginning on her At First Sight, and I thought, okay, I want to take that, something similar. And then I liked that she, at one point in the composition, it was very through composed actually. Mine is not so much. It's more of an A-B-A-C form. And but at one point in her song, she just changed key, and I thought, how refreshing is that? So I tried to put that in here too. So see if you can listen for those couple of things. My tune is called That Second Look. Sitting next to her, sitting next to her. All at once my heart started fluttering. Couldn't stop the thoughts arising. Had to take a second look inside. You sat next to me. Once again my heart started fluttering. Now I know it was that second look that how is everybody? Sleepy from lunch? I have many things I could talk about today, but
Do we need to use the microphone because?
maybe you guys.
Oh.
We have to use a microphone.
Yeah, Dena, there are some people watching online, so you need to
Oh.
be talking to the mic.
My goodness gracious. I forgot there are people online. So, I could go a lot of different ways today. I had a few things in mind, but I thought maybe also you might have some questions about almost anything, and it might drive these 45 minutes into different directions. Yes?
I have one about playing the piano and singing together, or
Yeah.
playing an instrument and singing together. Focus is divided.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you tackle this, and what would you advise somebody that's trying to play and sing together?
I started quite a long time ago, a little over, let's see, when was it? Yeah, a little over 30 years ago. So, but when I started to sing, it was because I couldn't play at the time. I had a couple of operations, and before that I was only going to be a pianist. I didn't really want to sing. But then when I couldn't play, I started singing, and so about 2.5 years I didn't play. I had a couple different operations, and started to get my vocal jazz repertoire together, and take voice lessons to classical technique lessons. And when I started to play and sing, I didn't even think about the fact that I would now decide to play and sing. I just did it because I'd been singing now for a couple years, standing up with another trio, and then I had to get this hand strong, so it was very, it was about half the size of this hand. It was really, there was no muscles, nothing, and it was stiff from the operations, so I had to, it took probably 6 months or 8 to 10 months, and almost a year later it felt back to normal. So during that time, I had to pay the doctors. I'm from New York, so we didn't have health care for everybody. And I had to pay for these because pre-existing conditions back then didn't count for insurance. So I had to gig. So I just found myself a little gig and started playing and singing, not really deciding, just doing it. And I could play very little with this hand, but I had been doing some left-hand bass gigs, so I did that and just started singing and playing. And once my hand became a lot better, and I started really, filling it out and blowing and chords and all this stuff, it wasn't that it was easy for me, but I eased into it, so I just started developing whatever, my own thing. And of course, listen to recordings of Carmen McRae, where she sings and plays by herself. It's a whole record, a Japanese label that did it. She was live in Tokyo, and she's just her and a piano, and it's all ballads. And so I just learned that record. I just note for note, learn the songs, put them in my keys, and that helped me. But it really took me some years in New York. Maybe a few people had mentioned it to me, maybe like closer confidants and fans that used to come to my gigs that are really well-respected music lovers. They would always say, you play so much piano, and I'm like, oh, well, thank you. No, but what they meant was that it was too much. And it took me some years, meaning when I'm singing. Blowing is one thing, that you should be able to put it at the highest level you can really try to. Anyone should. But it's the comping and everything was just too much, and I hadn't realized it's that much until maybe a few people had told me, and then I started thinking about it and listening to Carmen again and realizing how simple she was at what she did. The simple meaning tritone, ditone lines and roots and fifths and sevenths and simple, not huge orchestrated chords, and time feels over almost all the same on this record. But I tried to simplify things a bit, and this took me, I was already in my probably 15 or 20 years of doing it, that I really started to realize that when you play two things, meaning sing and play an instrument, it's not 50-50. When you sing, especially if you have lyrics, but not only, you're usually the soloist. And with the lyrics being there, no other instrument can do that except the voice. And if you sing and play an instrument, the voice is pretty much going to be more like 75% in the pie, and 25% is the accompaniment. If you think about, you guys are an audience that knows something about jazz. A lot of people we play for, they're just regular people, normal people, and they maybe musically don't know what's going on, and so they just take it in, right? So when someone out there in a regular audience is listening, when they hear a singer, that's what they're hearing. They don't hear much of if their person plays another instrument. It's a little bit, but it's not where their focus is because of the stories. It's very, very, very important. So I try to tell people, get the singing together and get your storytelling together and the voice and the instrument together. And then with the instrument, it's accompanying. And how you do that is really, the blend between what your stories are or what your voice texture is or whatever it is, that's going to be a complement to the voice, which is always going to be number one. Yeah. And you play, what do you play?
I sing.
You sing only or?
Sing and play.
And play. Play what?
Guitar.
Oh, guitar, okay. Same with guitar. I mean, if you listen to Jobim, you listen to many guitar player, even in the rock and singer-songwriter scene, it's here. That is number one. So, but we should all sing, actually, whatever instrument you work on. You should, if you can sing it, you can play it. I used to do workshops like this afternoon thing here years ago, and everybody got in a line, and they had to come up with their horns or the guitars or the basses or even drums. We had a mic over the drums, and they'd have to come up and take 2 choruses, one for or 2 solos, whatever it is, a couple choruses each, scatting, and then playing and scatting, either way. But everybody should sing, because it really, if you can get it in the voice, it's in the body, in the muscles, it's closest to the brain. No, I'm kidding. But anyhow, it really does make you feel it even more than outside instruments. So it's really important. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes?
Do you feel that, I guess you said, but in what are the ways that you feel that singing has improved your piano and also the comping?
Yeah. I mean, before I sang, I was studying jazz piano, listening to the records. I took a few lessons from a teacher that showed me 2 5/1s. That was about all I had, just a couple of lessons. And then I just learned it from the records mainly. But, and I was learning, just standard repertoire, All Things You Are, Alone Together, There'll Never Be Another You, All of Me, all these things. And then when I started singing, I was only singing, so I could really focus on the lyric, thinking about, I didn't have to think of another instrument. That's the hardest part to get past. But when my hand got better, and I started playing again and singing, I noticed immediately that my piano playing had changed. It became my mind became more aware of the melodies that I was using to solo with. They were much more lyrical, like a melody. Before that, I think I was trying to make the chord changes and arpeggiations and scales and all those things, because I was really just sort of beginning jazz piano, more or less, before it all went haywire. So I wouldn't call myself a very good soloist before the hand issues. And then afterwards, soloing or even comping, which, like I talked about a minute ago, I would comp too much because, I just didn't have a teacher. So I was just doing it, and I'm feeling what I felt. But once I started realizing what I was comping, having the melody here made the voicings change, because I didn't put the melody in this part of my fingers. I would voice below it or around it in a way that complemented the melody. And that's the main thing about any instrument comping. Even if it's a horn player playing behind another horn player or a singer or a pianist, or guitar, whatever, the complementing the melody. The melody is number one, usually. So with that in mind, it made me think about 5 chords. What alterations am I going to use? Well, what's the melody note? That gave me a lot of ideas. If it was the flat 9 or something, then I know it was going to be a flat 9 in the voicing. Maybe it can be also a sharp 9. So it made me think about a lot of this stuff. And as I said, I'm more self-taught, so I know what they're all called. Everything's called and everything, but it took me a while. I looked at a lot of books on different comping. Like a lot of the books, they'll show how to comp, walk in a bass line, and then bossa nova, what to do in the right hand. And I would do those things, but it really had to. I never found a book that talked about the melody, because that's a big thing, especially with the voicings. So that changed my playing immensely, actually. And then, of course, I said the soloing. It came more from knowing the melody so strongly. Before I was playing the melodies on the piano, but having sung them, it was really much stronger in my being. And then when I would solo, I would start to hear some of the melodies finally coming out. So every great solo has it. You gotta, if you look at transcriptions, you can see the melody in there. And you can also hear it. If the whole band cut out and Sonny Rollins sat there and blew on, I don't know, St. Thomas or whatever, you'll hear the chord changes going by, you know. Maybe not the average person because they don't know what chords are, but we do. We hear them. Did that answer your question? Anything else? How many first-year students do we have here? Okay, and what instruments? Trumpet. Saxophone. Drums, right, you were there this morning. Oh, and also drums, yes. And who else? First year? Yeah? Singing.
Yeah.
Super. Great.
I have a question.
Yes.
How long ago you started writing your compositions, and weren't you afraid to show your first compositions to an audience?
I started really young. I started out playing the piano and organ when I was 3. I think by maybe 9 or 10 years old, I wrote my first one. I still have it. And it's so funny to look at because it's wow. But I didn't compose for many years in between there. But I would say probably around 18, 19 years old when I was into the more fusion, the steps ahead, I started liking that stuff. So I tried writing some songs then. It's gone in spurts, and I never really, you know, like I said, I didn't go to university. I didn't then know anything about it except whatever I heard and whatever I felt. So, but I look back at them and I think, okay, well, there's a form to it. So, because I came out of classical music too, so, you know, in pop music, I played in a lot of different, almost every style of pop, rock, heavy metal, Grateful Dead tribute band, Pink Floyd tribute band, all kinds of stuff in my teens. So wedding bands, and played lots of styles and polkas, many, many styles. So I had form in my mind. So it was, at least my songs had a little bit of that, but they were very harmonically simple. And then as I got more into the standards mainly, and learning about the different chord progressions, I would try and write songs like other songs. That was what we talked about that this morning a little bit. Contrafacts. So I'm trying to put a new melody on the changes to There'll Never Be Another You, or there's a lot of those, you know. So I would try to do that a little bit, and I have stacks and stacks of half-finished things at home. That was one of them, the last one. But I was telling the composition class this morning too, like Carla Bley and Steve Swallow compose every single day, you know, because they call themselves composers. She's a pianist and a composer. And I met her about 3 years. I knew her from New York a few times on a few gigs I saw of her. I didn't know her, but I introduced myself, and she remembered me actually after 25 years or something. She came to Graz, and we had her and Steve Swallow for artists in residence for about, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks. And there was a question and answer like this, and someone asked them, or her, I think specifically, how do you approach composing? Do you come from the melody, or I mean, do you compose, you know, when do you compose? So she said, well, Steve and I, when we got married, we made a pact. We shook on it and said, we're going to write something every day. Because, she said later, it's a muscle. You got to get it used to doing things. And she said, even on holiday, when we go away, every day, even if it's for 15 minutes, even if it's only 2 or 4 bars, we write. So you have to exercise the muscle. And the more you get into it, the more the flow starts to come, and, you know, and all that. So when I met her again, back about 3 years ago, they were there 3 or 4 years ago, I started to compose more again, because I had taken a little break, or I'd do it once in a while, and I would always get stuck. That's why I have like many piles of half-done tunes. I just get stuck and then just leave it, and blah, blah, blah. But I pulled a few of them out through the years and recorded a few that were of those half-finished, and, you know, over a year or two I pull it out again. We all grow if we're doing this every day. You're bound to get better. So, and our ears open wider, and we hear different things, and we feel time differently in our lives. That's the great thing about being an artist. We're all our own different people that have experience to bring into standards, into Pat Metheny tunes, into our own compositions. We have to remember that. I mean, you're in school and there's sometimes a little competition, like, wow, he really writes this stuff. I'm never going to be that good, or, you know, doesn't matter. Just do it. If you do it long enough, you get better at it. And you learn about yourself. You learn about what you want to do more. And I think the greatest thing about composing at any level, even if you never wrote a tune and you're going to start tomorrow, at that level, it's a way for you to get to know what you know, because you're applying. Of course, we apply our skills to these standard tunes and everything, but when it comes to composition, you really get to know what you know and what you want to maybe know more of, or even get to know at all. You know, so I think it's a good form of, you know, if you're going to call yourself a musician or an artist, you should be composing. Even if it's, like I said, 2 to 4 bars, you could just start with that. 2 to 4 bars a day, that's what I want to do. 10 minutes in the morning with the coffee. Either at the piano or not. Try to hear it in your head, in your inner ear. See what you hear in there. I enjoy it. I should do it more, but I do a lot of teaching. And usually a lot of gigging. I'm usually on the road like all the time. So this is actually my first trip anywhere since it began. So great to be here with all of you. I'm glad that the schools are still open. Any other questions? Yeah?
Yes, I'm a saxophone player.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I play with a singer. When the singer sings the melody, I have to make the short phrases or get a line.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel always not good. So could you give me some advice how to play with when the singer sings the melody for horn player?
I would advise how I learned music. Listen to records. So if you listen to Etta Jones, write this down. Write it down. Now. Etta Jones. She was a great singer. If you don't know about her, her records, some of them, the quality of the records are not that great. And sometimes the band is a little lazy sounding. But some great musicians on some of the good records. And one of them that plays with her a lot, back, I don't know, for 30 or 40 years, is the great saxophonist Houston Person. Person, Person. And you'll hear firsthand how to play behind a singer with that. And then, of course, Lester Young and Billie Holiday. Just listen to those records and you'll hear what they do behind her, you know. Snooky Young, trumpet player. Is it Snooky Young? Stuff Smith also plays violin. But, you know, the Nat King Cole records, After Midnight, I think it's called, or something like that. It's got Sweet Lorraine on it and a bunch of great tunes. That record, just the people behind, Stuff Smith on violin plays behind Nat Cole, and I think it's, what did I say before the drum player? Oh, jeez, my mind. Anyhow, there's a great little trumpet player that has like the mute on, and how he blows, even when Nat Cole is singing. That's the ticket, is to try to find what to play as someone is singing. And my newest record, Jeremy Pelt plays on Nothing Like You, and you got to hear him play behind me. It's like I'm singing, and he's blowing like nice little lines around it, you know. And I just gave him my chart, concert key. He knew the tune already. We had done it I played for him on one of his gigs once, and he called it, actually, a couple of years ago down at Mesro in New York. And that's when I sort of reminded me of that tune again, so I pulled it out and started singing it. But the way he plays behind me on that, I have to say, it was genius, because he never got in my way. And it was just what he did. He was staying, again, knowing the melody is highly important for any accompanist. So you gotta sing it to know it, don't just play it. Like really sing it and get to know the words. And you'll learn a lot more about where to fill, you know, depending on the singer's phrasing too. So if they're singing the song real straight ahead like Nat King Cole does, you sort of have an idea of where those spaces are. But with Etta Jones, her phrasing is unbelievable. It's really very, very her own stories, deep storyteller. She comes out of Billie Holiday. And Billie too, her phrasing was always back phrased, you know, and Lester would have to find those spots, but 100% listening to the singer, hardly listening to yourself, you know. Sometimes I find that when I have had anyone play behind me on certain gigs, where sometimes I do these, they're called jazz party weekends, and the promoters get about 50 musicians, and they just put together bands. And you play all weekend. You do like 5 gigs in 3 days. And it's, you know, an hour set in the afternoon, an hour set at night, and it's with totally different people. And with no rehearsals. You just get together and call tunes, and we do gigs. And sometimes I've had more players and one guitar player that I could not sing. They were just playing way in my way, you know, because they were listening to themselves. They weren't listening to the whole with them as part of the whole. That's what we have to do. We can't just focus on one thing, like ourselves, or only the drums, or, I mean, for practicing and listening, that's a great thing to do. But when you're actually playing music with people, you really have to try to hear your part within the whole that's going on, the whole music. But those two I would recommend, Houston Person, Lester Young. I mean, there are quite a few more. If you give me a little time, I'll think of some more and list them, and I'll see you again this week probably, right? And then I can give it to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question.
I have a question about arrangements.
Yes?
Do you prefer to write special parts for drummers and for basses, or you just put chords and explain by words what do you want?
It depends. Today it was all just head charts with melody, sometimes not even melody, just chords. A few, but mainly melody. With some above the bar stops, little rhythm up on top when they come back in. Time feels. And sometimes when there's, you know, like a certain left-hand piano and bass lines, I'll have double staff with that on the bottom and they read that through. Sometimes I do, yeah. There's a certain song that, because I like to do songs somewhat similarly a lot, because I like arranging, but sometimes even my arrangements over time, they start to change anyhow. I start changing things, and And instead of starting in 2, we just go right in 4, or whatever. But sometimes when it's in 2, I'll write a special bass and drum part that shows that. Or with original music, I think I do it more. But for arranging for standards, I never really write out drum parts. It's just the kicks and just with drum markings, but that's for all of us to look at usually. Yeah. And you also arrange?
Yeah, and also I'm writing my material, and when I work with band, I all the time write score, special score for drummers and for bass, and sometimes it's so difficult for these musicians to play.
Yeah, most drummers I know don't look at drum charts. No, really.
And when I give more freedom.
Okay, I can name them. Al Wilson, Billy Hart, Billy Drummond, Kenny Washington, Neil Smith, Jimmy Cobb, all these people I play with, they don't want to see drum charts. They want the music, the song they're playing, and if there's a kick here and there, there's a nice little stuff. I mean, you can look, actually I can pass the one back to you. That has, see, none of these really have that many stops, but yeah, I mean, that's the Nothing Like You chart. And it just has above it the stop time. And that's what everybody looks at. With the melody. Yeah. And you heard what they could do. They don't need to see dang, 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 or half notes in the bass, or what notes to play. If we tell, it depends on the music, I must say. I don't know what your music is like, but this stuff you don't really have to do that with. Even some of my originals I don't, but certain ones, if it's a certain vibe that you need to get, you can do that for the first, and if it stays in the tune, if it's like a mood that you're going to keep all the way through, then you don't have to write it all out. You can just do the first few bars or the first phrase of what you really want. Like you want the bass to do boom, bing, gong, gong. And even if it goes through different changes, if you do that and then just put simile, dot, 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 they're going to be creative. You don't tell them exactly what notes, but if the chord changes, they're going to keep the same feel. And they can bring in their artistry to the music much more than having them just read notes that you've written. That makes musicians really uptight, and it also doesn't allow them to be so creative, and bring something to the music. Yeah. But it depends on the music. A little bit goes a long way, in other words. Let them bring themselves into it more. I think I only have one piece, I think, that I did. I recorded it in around 2002. It's called The Iris. You can look that up. Everything's on YouTube. And that one actually had a lot of things written out because it's sort of, I could play just the beginning of it if I remember it. I don't remember it. It's sort of like that kind of tune, and there I definitely had a bass with whole notes, because I wanted that vibe all the way through. I had even a brass choir that I wrote for, so all, like parts and chorales and things that go through it. So some songs are a little more, some can be more composed, yes, but if you do a whole evening of that, the music's dead. It's gotta have some life. You have to have some chance for the musicians, not only just blowing on it, but just even parts. Sometimes I think, I'm never going to write any more horn parts. they can come up with stuff usually better than I even think about, you know. And when it comes to drum parts, I'll even put funky, samba-ish, straight groove. Instead of being so specific, and let them hear the song and they come up with their own thing, because I'm not gonna write something, they're gonna come up with something better always. Pretty much, so. Yeah. Any other questions? What time do we have, folks? Didn't look. 10 minutes?
Some of your influences, like some records you love to listen to.
Yeah, well, I mean, from the piano side, just because I was a pianist first, Red Garland, especially the Miles stuff, but even his old solo records, and Bill Evans, Keith Jarrett, Ileana Elias, Ahmad Jamal, Horace Silver. I could go on and on. Yeah, Bud Powell, not so much for me, but because I was into Barry Harris. I lived in New York, used to go to some of his classes and play, because I had a steady gig with his drummer at that time, Jimmy Lovelace. And he would bring me there and say, come on, you gotta come and play. So I would sit and play, and they'd have like 50 singers there for 3 hours learning Out of Nowhere. For 3 hours. Really, it was unbelievable how he could fill 3 hours with one song. He'd have them all sing all the roots all the way through as a group. And then thirds, and then the sevenths, and then he'd have this half do thirds, and that half do sevenths, as someone else sang the tune. I mean, it was just great, you know. I learned a lot. I wasn't there, I wasn't taking the class, but I was playing. But you learn a lot just being part of it, so it was great. And his playing, I love Bud Powell, of course, but Barry, there's something a little different that I like, and maybe it's because I knew him, so I like him. But, and also for piano, I mean, Nat King Cole, you know, before he was a singer, he was a pianist. And he has records out with just his piano trio, with guitar, and sometimes even with drums, I think, too. So he was a phenomenal pianist before he started to sing, and even after he started to sing. But he simplified also. That's another way I learned to, when I started listening to records. It's like, oh yeah, never listened to that before. The space and the timing of the comping and the where they do things and how they set up a tune, all those things. So, but also for piano, Shirley Horn. Even though when I heard her record in about 1991, when I moved to New York, a friend of mine, he says, you got to hear this. This is you must hear it. And he put it on, and I fell in love. I just was like, oh my God, this is what I do almost. I'm gonna be. She's really my top when it comes to not only piano. I mean, her piano was unbelievable too. The voicings and the timing and the feeling but then her storytelling. For me, I feel Shirley Horn even more than Billie Holiday, and they're considered storytellers, you know. But I love Billie too. But Shirley gets me. And the combination of how she plays and sings, the whole balance and between the two, and the piano complementing the voice in such a way, voicing wise and color wise. She's a big influence. Yeah. And then vocally, when I started to sing jazz, I started listening to all the classic recordings, you know. For me, Carmen McRae is probably my all-time favorite. Not that I love everything she's done. I hardly like everything that anyone has done, really. There's always something. And usually, in our case in jazz, when the 50s came, a lot of record companies would try and tell the artist what to record and how, and you know, record companies telling Ella Fitzgerald to lose weight to wear blonde hair, I mean, and to do like Beatles songs in a jazz way. It didn't really work so well. She tried, she gave it a shot, because it was a record label telling her, you know. But what did she end up doing? What she's best at. Great American Songbook and songs like that. So Ella was a good influence, but not as much as, say, Sarah Vaughan and some other singers you might not know of, like Joe Stafford, Joe Stafford. She was actually more of a country singer and a commercials, like she did jingles. She had perfect pitch. So she could go into a studio, look at sight read some, Coca-Cola commercial or whatever, or Pampers, whatever it was, and she would just, be able to sing it right away. She was a great jingle singer. But her jazz singing, it's more, I would say, the crooning style of singing, but just the tone of her voice is gorgeous, her pitch is perfect, and the way she told stories was really, I think, very unique and nice for that time. And she and her husband actually made some really cool records. He was a pianist and an organist. And they used pseudo-names, so like different names. So it's Joe Stafford, and I can't remember his name now. But they made records under the names Darlene and it's either Jonathan Edwards, something like that. But if you look up Darlene Edwards, they're comedy records, musical comedy. It's since she has perfect pitch, she does a wonderful job at singing out of tune. I can't even explain it. You just have to listen. There's like some jazz songs, there's some Americana songs, and some things like Tico Tico, and all these different kinds of songs on it. And they even did like Saturday Night Fever songs. What's that one? Some 70s disco tune, I forget, Saturday Night Fever or one of those. And it's hilarious. It's almost like, I don't know if you know Larry Goldings. Do you know that name? So he has this pseudo character that he has online called Hans Gruber or something. You know, Hans, and he talks about like, and he's Austrian, Hans Groiner. And he talks about how he's frustrated at why Thelonious Monk composed the way he composed. So he tries to fix all the tunes. So he does you know that one? What is that one? Yeah. He goes, Hans Groiner says, it's just a pity that he cannot hear how the music should go. And he goes, this is how it should sound. It's something like that, but it's hilarious. You got to look at Larry Golding, Hans Groiner. So anyhow, Darlene and Jonathan Edwards, that is the name. They made records like this, but they're really, just for comedy. When you have friends over or something, just put it on and just see if they hear the funny stuff that they do with these tunes. They change the harmony. She's singing out of tune half the time. So it's sort of musical jazz comedy. And they do other songs too, so not just jazz. So anyhow, Thank you for coming today. Thanks for all the great questions. Yeah, I'm gonna see you guys throughout the week. Thank you.
Paul Weston, yes, the real name. Darlene and Jonathan. Yeah. You gotta listen, it's hilarious. Darlene. So it's Darlene. Yep, that's it. Hilarious. It's really, really funny. Darlene. Yeah.
Why did they?
Just to be funny.
Yeah.
Really, it's funny. You gotta listen to it. It's like, oh my god.
I thought it because of the culture or something. No.
No, they were just being funny.
Oh,
Being
thank
silly.
you.
And it's really hilarious. It's genius. Nothing before that nobody ever did that before. It's really very unique.
Well, how about your first day?
First day? Very nice. I just that there aren't that many students.
Yeah, because of the
Yeah.
situation, so the staffs were
Yeah.
limiting the number of the students.
Okay. Well, anyhow, it's nice that there are some here and they have nice questions. That was good. I had a whole 3 or 4 different things I could talk about today, but sometimes, when it's this small of a group too, just talk, get some questions. Everybody has questions.
Yeah, and everybody was really focusing on the class and
Yep. I think everybody was in it. So. Yeah, good.
I really enjoyed your playing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I hadn't played with them in 10 years. And we had 2 minutes of a sound check rehearsal. So they were just reading stuff. Which was great. I got one of these great. I got one of these nice shirts. I'm so excited. Yeah. Keep that in there. Good.
So are you going to your place?
Yeah, I think I'll just go back because I have to we're going to do the university drive. We got a new drum professor. Well, we don't have.
We don't have one.